Welcome to the podcast, A Drink with Derek. Follow comedian Derek Richards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch all episodes of the podcast. Now grab a drink and join your host, Derek Richards.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Las Vegas. Derek Richards out here in Las Vegas. Thanks so much for joining me here. It was cloudy and rainy and 47 degrees this morning here in Las Vegas. But you know what? I was positive. I thought the day would change, and it is now sunny and absolutely gorgeous outside. So I needed to change my disposition. I needed to be nicer. My guest, who's coming up, Billy Garan, told me that on the cruise ship we were working together. He goes, "Oh my God, you're so mean." We'll get to that here in a minute. Anyhow, thanks for joining me. Make sure you go onto YouTube and check out all the episodes of A Drink with Derek. Comedian Brad Garrett is on there. Hall of Famer Drew Pearson, NFL Hall of Famer Drew Pearson is on there. And Roy Wood Jr. from The Daily Show. Again, go onto YouTube, type in A Drink with Derek, and you'll see all the episodes that are up available for your viewing and listening pleasure. Huge thanks to our sponsor, VegasSportsAdvantage.com. If you're going to bet sports, you need to bet with your head, not with your heart. These guys do the legwork. They analyze numbers. They analyze weather conditions, who's starting, who's sitting, who's sick, who's not sick. And if you go into VegasSportsAdvantage.com and you type in the promo code Derek35, you can get 35% off any of their packages. Any of them. It could be a small package, could be a large one. 35% off, promo code Derek35. Save yourself some dough. Also, check out my album, Double Down, wherever you end up downloading your comedy. It's iTunes, Spotify, Amazon. Very happy with the way this came out, recorded in Fort Myers, Florida at Laugh-In Comedy Cafe. Double Down, available on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon. Also, check out the Irish Comedy Tour. We are coming up on March the 3rd. We'll be in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. And then we roll through Schenectady, New York, Peekskill, New York, Boston, got some stuff in Pennsylvania, head down to Florida for a while, and then New Jersey, Galloway, New Jersey, actually where my guest is from here today. We'll get to that in a moment also, but the IrishComedyTour.com, got a couple new guys joining us on the tour this year, Patrick Garrity and also Michael Malone. So with that out of the way, get to my guest here, who happens to be from New Jersey, spent some time out in California. You've seen him on Showtime, HBO. He's done a number of TV commercials as well. He's a comedian, impressionist guy. I had an absolute blast working with this guy on Royal Caribbean cruise ship. It was about a month ago, and we just had such a good time. Billy Garan is my guest here on A Drink with Derek.
Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Garan. I do impressions that nobody does. Do you want to see some? Say yes. I'm going to take it back to your childhood. I don't care how old you are. I'm going to do Frank Morgan for you. Say, who's that? Frank Morgan was the guy who played the wizard in The Wizard of Oz when you were just a child. Here we go, Frank Morgan as the wizard. And remember, my metal friend, that hearts are not judged by how much you love, but by how much you're loved by others. More. Let's do some classic impressions tonight. Classic stuff. Taxi. Oh, here's another one. Captain Kirk for the hearing impaired. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in Mexico. Hey, Holmes. Here's another one. Okay. Every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Come on, run to the chopper. Come on, do it now. Come on. Okay. Watch this. The Discovery Channel. Same fish. Every week on the Discovery Channel. Jack Nicholson as an alien. Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry. It's a 44 Magnum handgun. It's the most powerful gun in the world. One shot blow a man's head clean off. And the only question you've got to be asking yourself tonight, punk, is how big is this gun? Let's do Casablanca, my friends. The entire motion picture, Casablanca. Here we go. The whole movie, Casablanca. All right, sweetheart, listen, baby. You know of all the gin joints and all the towns of the world, you gotta walk into my place. But Rick, this is a crappy way to make a living. Where did I go wrong? I don't know. It's supposed to be Ingrid Bergman. With my nose, it looks like Barbara Streisand, right? It's like, people. But Rick, we can't live without the letter of transit. Who has a little transit? The weasel head. Who has a little transit? The weasel head. The weasel. Rick, has me. Don't let the fat thing get me. Have it. It's Peter Lorre, is it good? Have it. But Rick, I told you last night, Rick.
Wrong one.
But Rick, I told you. Shut up! You never screwed up on your job, you little weasels. I read in the paper that deaths from drunken driving have gone down all over America. Isn't that great? Yeah. You know what's gone up? Drunken pedestrians hit by cars. It's true. People are leaving their cars, they're walking home drunk, they're getting killed on the way. This is gonna start a whole new thing at parties. Jack, I'm going home. Frank, give me your shoes. A drunk walks into a bar. He goes, partner, give me some whiskey fast. The partner's pouring us whiskey. Here's more whiskey. He's pouring us whiskey. Drunk starts drinking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The partner goes, my God, I've never seen a man drink that fast. He goes, you drink that fast if you have what I have. The partner says, what do you have? He says, $1.50. Folks, you've been a great crowd, everybody. Thank you so much.
Oh man,
that was the Billy Hackmeister set, man. That was great. That was so much fun. I forgot. I haven't seen that clip in years. It's great. It's so much. I was watching it laughing because I always caught a lot of flack because of all the impressions and the props, and I still adore all that stuff and still do it in the show no matter where I am. It's great.
Well, it cracks me up. It was. I remember seeing it the first time on the cruise ship because you did 2 different sets. We were working together in the comedy club on the ship, and there wasn't. And then you didn't have the big wheel with all the.
Yeah. When we did
Casablanca,
the comedy club sets, I was going to do like a traditional stand-up set without any props, with it. You know what I mean? Because it was. And I wanted to make my bones in that room as a comic. And then, I knew for the family show, I had all that other goofy garbage that, I never do. And I could do it for the family show for the kids. It was a blast doing it,
So much fun to watch, man. Great to see you, my friend. It was a great time out at Royal Caribbean when we had 2 weeks together. Two amazing romantic weeks in the Caribbean.
And you know what? The amazing thing was I lose weight on those ships when I come home. My wife goes to me, she goes, you always look a little bit better when you come home. You're thinner. She goes, how do you do that? And I go, you're just walking all day, all night. You're in motion all the time. There was never anywhere. We'd go out to dinner, grab a dinner, then have to go down to a show. Finish the show, go grab a banana, do another show, and then go to the bar after that. I was really easy to convince to go to the bar. Every night I would go to myself, no, I'm going to cut back a little bit. And you go, come on, 1. I go, okay, just 1. And then it would be 2, 3, 4. But, that was just me.
Yeah, you were a hard sell on that one. That was hysterical. Every single night you're like, I'm just going to go back to my room. And I'm like, come on. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, you had to twist my arm like about... There was no twisting involved.
There was 0 twisting involved. That was such a good time out there, and great to meet you. Great to work with you. You had started back in the 80s doing comedy. 70s.
Yeah.
In New Jersey or where?
New York. In New York, I started I started. I think the first show I ever did, I was probably about 19, and I knew from watching some of the. I remember watching a show out in New York called Mike Douglas, and Mike Douglas had on as a guest. He had on Buddy Hackett, and they were talking about how to get started in comedy. And Buddy Hackett said, "Well, you can't anymore. There's just no place for a guy to work and work the craft." Because by that time, all the Catskills were gone. But then after that, so he said, you got to find a place where they'll let you work. So I had a friend of mine that owned a bar. And I went to his bar and brought all my friends in one night, and it bombed miserably. It just didn't work. And after that, I stayed away from it for a while. And then all of a sudden, clubs started opening up in New York back in the, I'd say late 60s, maybe early 70s. Things started to open up in New York. Dangerfield's opened, I think, around 1969. And I was going there when I was like 19, 20, and I was blowing my paycheck just watching Rodney. And I learned a lot from watching Rodney, because he was kind of Rodney, Phyllis Diller. That was still my era I was growing up in. The new start of comedy style had never happened yet. So I was still kind of looking at these older guys and women that were comics of that era that had probably been around, maybe the tail end of vaudeville. And Rodney was real quick and precise on the delivery. And I emulated a lot of that. But I also did a lot of impressions when I first started out, too, like you saw in the first clip. That was a holdover from early beginnings, probably early 80s and stuff at Catch a Rising Star, the Improv in New York. When people were it was a different comedy scene back in the 80s. It was when it started to happen, Catch a Rising Star, the Improv in New York, none of those clubs were really comedy clubs. They were cabaret, and they would be a singer, a comic, a ventriloquist, a mime. There could be anything at all, and then a comic. It was always something in a comic, something in a comic. As a matter of fact, I think Jerry Seinfeld once joked years and years ago. He said, "Someday I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called It's a Singer and Then You," because that's how it was. You'd be in Catch a Rising Star. They go, "Okay, you're on next. It's a singer, and then you're on." So things were different. I mean, the whole thing, I think, really took off. Probably one of the catalysts for it was probably Freddie Prinze may have been the main catalyst at that time, because Carson had gone into Catch a Rising Star, saw Freddie Prinze, got him on the show. Prince's career took off immediately, and he got a sitcom. And after that, everybody in New York was thinking, I'm going to be a star if I can pass auditions at Catch, the Improv. So there was lines and lines of young acts outside waiting to audition to get on into some of those clubs so that they could be the next Freddie Prinze.
Now, who did you end up coming up? Yeah, who did you end up coming up with that ended up blowing up?
Oh my God! When I was starting out at the clubs, there was a million guys. Larry David was a perfect example. I would be at the Improv, and Larry was such an unusual act. He would go on late at night, and the audience really never at that time. Larry was doing stuff that the audience really didn't understand. I mean, I remember seeing Larry one time on stage at the Improv ranting to a judge that wasn't there in like a little scenario about having to break into an apartment to change an answering machine tape, and that which later became a Seinfeld episode. Became a Seinfeld episode. A lot of Larry was working on these little obscure things that eventually became Seinfeld episodes later on. So he was one. I'm trying to think. Bill Maher. I remember seeing Bill up at Catch all the time. He was always sitting around with the coffee cup in his hand, and he would go up on stage and I think he was always political back then also. But I mean, there was so many people. Jerry Seinfeld, I got to open for him a couple of times in different clubs, but he worked primarily, I think, at the comic strip, and I didn't get up that far uptown too often. Catch a Rising Star, David Brenner used to come in there all the time to work on material. Rodney would stop in when he had, Rodney Dangerfield was a complete pisser, man, because he would run around in town in a bathrobe. I mean, this guy would be literally wearing a bathrobe. He would leave his club, finish his show, walk out in a bathrobe, get into a limousine. They would take him up to Catch a Rising Star. He would walk in to Catch in a bathrobe and get up on stage and go, "Hey, how you doing? I got a couple of new lines." And he would do them for the audience and go, "What do you think? What do you think?" And he would listen to people in the audience how they liked the new stuff. I mean, it was the most interesting time. And I did a lot. I was doing props at the time because everybody was trying something different, because there was no formula for, it wasn't like now. It wasn't, it was unlike any time. Maybe it was similar to vaudeville, when people could do things that, they didn't know what they wanted to do or how they were going to do it, but they were trying everything. I remember Andy Kaufman. I used to see Andy a lot at Catch a Rising Star when I was going there as a patron. And he would go up on stage, and, the first time I saw Andy Kaufman, he just blows you away because you don't see it coming. After he became famous and everybody knew the gag, it was one thing. But he would do this Elvis impression. He would come out and do that little Latka character. He'd go, hello, how you doing? And he would come up and do that character, and you would just sit there, with a drink going, gee, this guy is interesting. What's he going to do? And then he started to do that little Victrola, and then he would do this Mighty Mouse song, and then he would turn around and do Elvis and just blow the audience away because nobody saw it coming. And that was the uniqueness of comedy back then, that, and there was a group of guys called the Untouchables. There was plenty of acts that were doing three-person acts. There was Michael Patrick King and a girl named Mindy. It was called King and Mindy. And they split up years later, and Michael Patrick King went on to be the writer, producer, and everything else for Sex and the City. So these were all the people that were around coming up at the time. And we would all do these little gigs. The Improv, Catch a Rising Star, none of those clubs ever really paid any kind of money. You would get maybe $5 or $10 to do a set, which would give you cab fare to the next club. But there was other people at the time that were coming around. That there was this guy named Jim Balatzos, and all the comedians remember Jim Balatzos because he had these one-nighters that were all over New Jersey, New York, and you would go into New York. They would pick you up at the Improv. They would take you to this job. You'd go out into a bar where they had a little mic set up and a stand. You would do 20, 30 minutes of comedy. You would make $50 to $100 and go home for the night, and that was how we learned. We learned in bar rooms. We learned in, back rooms of, pizzerias and any place else they would let us do a show. So it was, it was a really, really fascinating time to watch, and to see all these people come up. And then there was this big exodus to Los Angeles, very late 80s, because things started to change in New York. I think, David Brenner had come up out of New York, obviously Freddie Prinze, but then Carson was moving out to LA. The change started to happen where people were going out to Los Angeles because that's where the TV shows were being done. That's where people were, then all of a sudden, Roseanne got a show, Tim Allen got a show, and everybody started giving comedians shows and deals. They would give them a holding deal where they would give you like $100,000, and it was like a 3-year deal, and you would kind of belong to them for 3 years. Like they were trying to find a vehicle for you to give you a series. So you were under this contract while they were looking actively and auditioning you for different parts. It was a crazy time. It was just crazy. I mean, those sort of things don't even happen anymore. That they make those kind of deals with people. But back then, it was a fascinating time to be around.
That's a great, and again, great. I was talking to Al Romas, and he was talking about how he had started off too. Being from New York, and then working, doing his routine, or starting his routine when he was working. He was in the Navy at the time, so he was down doing these bar gigs, around Norfolk, Virginia, and having to go up in front of these drunken college kids, drunken sailors, and drunken tourists, and trying to hone your act that way, which is, it's a tough way to do it, but like I said, it's a great story. Like I said, you talking about doing these gigs in the back of pizza joints, and different bars, and obviously some comedy clubs back then.
Yeah, there was some clubs. I mean, there was some full-time comedy clubs around the 80s. I mean, there was a lot of them, but there was a ton of one-nighters. I mean, there was New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Almost every bar in that, 4-state area had a comedy night. And at one time,
Right.
I mean, I still, to this day, I could be driving up in New York State. I'll get lost. And I'll go, where am I? And I'll look up, I go, oh, I did comedy at that place. You'll see a joint and you go, oh, I remember we did a comedy show there. You know what I mean? Like, that's how, and these places were out in the middle of nowhere. There was a place called Mr. Rip's Comedy Club, and it was up in Nyack, New York, and it was across the street from a field of sheep. And I remember, and there was like, and we got like a biker crowd. We would get like a biker crowd that would come in, these really kind of rough characters. And I also worked at a place called Pips in Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. And Pips Comedy Club was legendary because it was basically the first paying job for a comedian outside of New York. Like, New York City didn't pay you, but if you went to Brooklyn, you could get paid. And it wasn't a lot. I mean, you might have made, like $35 to do a show, but it was your first real paid engagement. And the first time I did it, it was nothing like the nightclubs I was in. Nothing. I was learning, I got out of the bars. I was learning the nightclub trade, and I went to Brooklyn, and I was working Pips, which was kind of a cross between comedy club and bar. I mean, there was a bar right there, and people sitting, and they were a rough audience. They were rough. And I remember going on my first night, and I bombed terribly. And I was on, and I left the stage after like 10 minutes. And Marty, Marty Schultz, who was one of the owner's sons at the time, Marty and Seth eventually owned the club after the father passed. But Marty came running up to me. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Marty," I go, "those people, they don't like me." And he goes, "I don't care." He goes, "It doesn't matter." He goes, "Get back up there." I go, "What?" I go, "But I don't want to have a bad show." He goes, "I don't care what kind of show you got." He goes, "You get back up there and you do your job." So luckily that night there was a guy in the audience. It was amazing. There was a guy in the club that night that was a pretty seasoned comic. And he said, "I'll go up and do a few minutes." So he went up and did the time, because I had been, at this point, I was pretty embarrassed. And Marty, and instead of firing me, Marty goes to me, "You come back tomorrow night, you get up there and you do it. And I don't want to hear any crying to bed." I went, "Okay." So I went up there the next night, and I had a pretty good show, and I did the whole show. And after that, Marty and I became pretty good friends, and I worked there for years. But there was a lot of tough stories. There was a story about, I think it was related to Pips Comedy Club. There was a guy up there, and the guy was having a really bad set, and he looks at the audience and he says, "Oh, listen," he goes, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, my show isn't going so good." And somebody in the audience yells out, "He's wounded. Let's get him." So I mean, that was like
He's wounded. Let's get him.
He's wounded. Let's get him. That's kind of the take. So yeah, Pips could be a rough joint in its day. It really was. It was unbelievable.
That is so funny.
And I had, we talk about wise guys. Back in all the guys that I grew up with in New Jersey were like wise guys or wise guy wannabes. So
sure.
So one night I told the guys from the diner, the guys that were like, hey, how you doing? That, they said, hey, well, you going to be doing a show where? So I told them I was doing a show at Pips in Brooklyn. Don't you know those guys jumped in the car and like 12 of them showed up with their girlfriends at Pips in Brooklyn. And these guys all have shiny suits on, and they all got like handkerchiefs, like, hanging out of the breast pocket of the coat like that. So they're all got silk handkerchiefs, and they're all standing on like the main drag outside the club. And Marty comes up to me and says, Garan, he said, are those your friends outside? I go, yeah. He goes, good. He goes, I thought it was a magic act because of all everybody had. And no, those are the guys. I go, those are my guys. So I'll tell you a story about
That
this.
is
I'll
so
never
funny.
forget. When I went to Pips in Brooklyn the first times, I had to have a job as a comic. I mean, obviously, comedy wasn't going to pay your way because you were making money, in dribs and drabs, nickels and dimes. So I was working at Pips and picking up a few bucks, but most of my money was coming from being a chauffeur. I had gotten a job that had, hours that I could negotiate. I could manipulate the hours. My boss at the limousine company really liked comedy. He was a really funny, sarcastic, dry-witted guy, but he loved comedy. And he loved the fact that I was doing it, and he was very supportive. So that gave me a lot of help because, he would say, where are you working tonight? And I go, I'm working in Brooklyn. So one night he says to me, what are you doing tonight? And I says, I can't work tonight. I got a job in Brooklyn. He goes, no. He goes, I need you tonight. And I go, I can't. I got to work at Pips. And he goes, okay. He goes, I'm gonna solve your problem. I said, I don't have a problem. You have a problem because you need a guy. He goes, no. He goes, here's what we're going to do. He goes, you're going to pick up my car. You're going to come down here and pick up the limo. Then you're going to take the limousine and you're going to go up to Nabisco Corporation and you're going to pick up Mr. Bobo at Nabisco. Then you're going to take Mr. Bobo, you're going to drive Mr. Bobo to JFK Airport in Brooklyn. JFK Airport is 5 miles away from Pips. You're going to drop off Mr. Bobo. You're going to keep my car. You're going to go to Brooklyn. You're going to do the job at Pips. You're going to drop off the car later that night at 2 a.m. and go home. And you're going to get paid for the comedy job and the limousine job. How are you going to beat that? And I went, hey, that sounds like a good deal. So I get the limousine. I pick up Mr. Bobo. I take Mr. Bobo to Brooklyn, to JFK. Then I drive to Pips. Well, I get to Pips and I pull up in a stretch limousine. And Marty, the owner, comes out and he goes, what are you doing in a stretch limousine? I go, well, this is how I make money, when I'm not doing comedy. He goes, oh, good. He goes, listen, Marty jumped in the back and maybe take him to Coney Island so we could get hot dogs and eat them in the back of the limo. So we drive to Coney Island. We have hot dogs in the back of the limo, me and him. So then we go back to Pips, and Marty makes sure I got a parking spot out in front that takes up 2 cars. I get the spot. I go in. I do the show. Now this is the best part. I do the show. I finish the show. I come out, and the limousine has a flat tire. It's got a flat tire, and I'm dressed in a suit, and I'm going like, oh great. I got a flat tire. I'm in a shark skin suit. So the barmaid says, you got a jack? I went, yeah. She says, give me the jack. She pops the truck. This is the barmaid in Brooklyn, okay? And this was a big girl. I mean, she was pretty, but she was big and muscular. She says, give me the jack. I says, I could do this. She goes, no, you're not. You're gonna, fuck up your suit. I said, okay. She changes the tire. She pops the hood, jacks up the car, and changes the tire. She jacks the car down, throws me the keys. I said, you're incredible. I go, I want to marry you. She goes, I'm busy tomorrow. She goes, I said, I want to marry you. She goes, I'm busy tomorrow. I love that.
That's classic. Only a barmaid in Brooklyn is going to go ahead and grab the jack and change the tire on your limousine. That is beautiful. See, that's why I love those stories. We're hanging out on the ship and just BSing the whole time. And you have probably one of the most upbeat demeanors of anybody in this business that I've run into, because it was so funny. I was mentioning earlier when I would go on some sarcastic rant and we were on the ship and you're like, oh my God, you're so mean. Be happier. And hearing this come from a seasoned vet comic from New Jersey, of all things, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I do need to change my disposition on some things.
Now listen. Everybody's got. I got tons of anger issues, babe. Tons. I was in the supermarket like 2 weeks ago, and I broke the machine at the self checkout. You know, it was doing something. I'm like, damn! I grabbed it, and the thing pops open, and the bells are going off, and the manager comes over. He looks at me and he goes, "Anger issues," and I went, "Yeah." You know what was I gonna say? What was I gonna say? I broke your machine. I'm sorry. I don't know. You know, look, I am one of the guys. I'm just like you, man. I really have, I have a lot of anger issues. I got a lot of like sarcasm. I became a sarcastic person. I think it's because of where we grew up. East Coast, my mother, I'll tell you, my mother was always sarcastic like that. And I remember I was living out in California and I had to come home. I had to move back to Jersey like 10 years ago because my mother just couldn't be by herself anymore and she had no one to take care of her. So I had to move back to Jersey. So I was living in her house for like a month trying to figure out what I was going to do. In the meantime, I took my clothes to the dry cleaner. There was this Asian dry cleaner. Go figure. Anyway, there was an Asian dry cleaner down the street from us, and he was him and his wife were the sweetest people. Really nice. His name was Mr. Lee. Really, really nice people. So I drop off a suit, and I come back a week later, and he says to me, "Oh, Mr. Garan," he goes, "Guess what?" He said, "You left this in your jacket pocket." He gave me an envelope with $50 in it. The guy found $50 in my pocket, put it in an envelope, and gave it back to me. I said, "Mr. Lee," I said, "that is like the nicest thing you could do." I says, "Thank you so much." And he goes, "You're welcome, Billy." He goes, "You're a good customer." So I left and I went home. I said to my mother, I said, "Ma, you're not going to believe this. Mr. Lee found $50 in my pocket and he gave it back." My mother goes, "It was probably 100 and he kept 50.
I wish I could have met your mom.
She was a character. She had a mouse in her house when I was there. And she goes, my mother says to me, she goes, "There's a mouse." She goes, "Get rid of him." I go, "All right." So I got a little trap, one of those.
I like how your mom, by the way, sounds like a mobster.
She always, yeah, she was.
Hey, there's a mouse.
I always picture my mother with a cigarette in her hand because she was a heavy smoker when I was a kid, and she was always like nah, 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 with a cigarette. So anyway, this mouse. She says to me, "Get rid." So I bring this little trap home, and it's one of those humane traps where you catch the mouse and you just put him outside.
Right.
And I'm looking at it. My mother goes, "Well," she goes, "Did you get him?" I go, "No." And she goes, "What are you going to do with him when you get him?" I said, "I'll put him outside." She goes, "He's going to come back in." I said, "What's he got, a key?" I don't worry about it. He's not going to find his way back in. And my mother goes like this. She goes, and she's looking out the back window at one of her neighbor's house, and she goes, "All right, if you get him, put him by that guy's house. I don't like that guy." Like that. So then one night, I'm looking at the trap, and she goes, "Did you get the mouse?" I go, 3 times that mouse got in the trap. 3 times that mouse got the cheese, and 3 times he got out of there. And my mother goes, "Oh, a smart mouse." I was like, "Oh." like she's Edward G. Robinson. "What are you, a smart mouse?" "Yeah." "What are you, a smart mouse?"
I want to pull up promo sheet that you had sent over, and it's got pictures of some of the people that you had worked with. And I'm going to have Sean go ahead and pull that up here. And this is it's a pretty cool looking sheet that you got put together here. So going around here, the people that you had worked with, just give me a quick little paragraph on some of the most memorable ones that you've had the chance to hook up.
Well,
with.
the most recent one I did was probably, I don't forget how many years ago it was before COVID, but Dion and the Belmonts. Dion was performing at Westbury Music Fair, which is now called something else, but it was Westbury Music Fair. And you know, Dion was an idol of mine from when I was a kid. I mean, he was already a star, you know, doing Dion and the Belmonts and all those doo-wop stuff. You know, I got to meet him and hung out with him for a little while. Really good guy. Susan Anton. I did a tour with her. I was in Florida and I auditioned for William Clare Entertainment, and I just did another showcase down there for them recently. And I had gotten some work out of the showcase, but the agent said to me, look, he says, I can bring you down here for a couple of isolated dates, and it's not going to pay that much, or I can get you less money, but more work. He goes, I can have you like open for somebody and go on a little tour. I said, that would be great. So he put me with Susan Anton. And the night I met her, she was really pretty cool. She was a good hang, and she was a very funny lady. You know, she said to me something. I said to her, I said, well, listen, I said, you know, I do some impressions in my act. I said, I do a Dudley Moore impression. Now, she was married to Dudley Moore, you know, so I had said to her, I said, I don't want you to think it was like something, and she goes, no. She goes, do it. She goes, Dudley was a great guy. She goes, you remind me of him. So I said, okay. So I did that, and she had gone out with a lot of celebrities, because I remember saying something to her like, you know, she was very tall. She's a really tall girl, but she was always known to be like 6 something, you know. So I said, because she was married to Dudley Moore. So I said, I think I'm
Dudley Moore is very small.
Moore. Yeah, I said to her something. I said, well, I'm taller than Dudley Moore. And she said, no. I was like, what? I'm not. And I said, what about Al Pacino? She goes, no. She goes, I know Al. You're not bigger than Al. I go, who am I bigger than? She goes, Billy Barty. Billy Barty was an old circus midget. Circus. He was around forever. Let's see.
What did she do? Was she singing?
Yeah. She did like a jazz show. She did like a show. It was jazz entertainment and stuff. And we did the condo circuit in Florida, and we did like 10 days of shows. And she was a cool hang, and she was really nice. Little Richard was hired. I was working in Reno, Nevada, in a topless show. I was the comedian in a show called Skin Tight. There was 2 shows. There was an early show at 8 o'clock for family, and the late night show at like 10 o'clock that was topless. And the topless show, I would say, was probably the best gig of my life. That was an incredible job. Every night backstage with the most gorgeous naked women in the world, and they were like, really, they kind of go, Billy, can you do this for me? Can you? And I go, anything you want, anything. It was great. So anyway, So I was the comedian on the show, and Little Richard was slated to go on that afternoon. They had a piano outside. It was going to be like sort of right outside the front door at the Silver Legacy. I think it was the Silver Legacy. It was right outside the front door, or not the Silver Legacy. Wait a minute, Harrah's. I think it was Harrah's. And Little Richard was going to go on in the afternoon outside for he was going to do 2 or 3 numbers just to get people in, I think, to see his other show or something. I forget if it was a promotional thing. So they said, well, Little Richard can't go on till it gets dark. They didn't know that because I guess he had some religious thing. I don't know if he was a Muslim. I don't know anything about his religious callings, but didn't want to go on supposedly because he couldn't go on till sunset. I mean, if that's, I don't remember, I don't know what it was. It could any religion. So, or maybe it was his personal preference. I don't know. But they said you have to go on. And I this came out of like nowhere. I'm going like, what? They go, yeah, we need you like to go downstairs and do 10 minutes, in front and and just do like 10 minutes until Little Richard's ready. And I went like, okay. Well, if you're a comic, comedy does not work outside. It doesn't work outside. You, as a comic, you know that. Singing, Little Richard could perform outside in a piano. It would work fantastic. But a comic, it's not going to fly. Comedians don't do well outside. So I go on. I'm on my show for like 7 minutes, and I'm just barely getting by. I'm hammering it. I'm getting a few laughs, but it's tough. And at that moment, the train goes by. There was a train that goes by in Reno, and I'm going, and the train goes, and I go, that's my ride. I gotta go. And that's how I ended my show. Running off to the train, and for whatever reason, it worked really well. It was kind of cool. Let's see what else you got. Let's see. Little Anthony and the Imperials. Man, I think I lost my virginity to those guys. And just about everybody that worked with them said that they would say to me, everybody tells us that, that they lost their virginity because they had this 50s, 60s sound that was really romantic and, really kind of a haunting melodies, some of them. And Little Anthony did just great stuff. And I got to work with them at the Nugget in Reno because I was the opening act there for the for Little Anthony. But what happened in Reno, we were working the Nugget, and the Nugget had an elephant act. That's why they needed a comic.
An elephant act?
They had an elephant act. They had, and now the elephant. I think as years went on, they started to catch. I think they caught a lot of flack, maybe from animal rights groups, even though the elephants were treated very well and they had their own paddock and everything where they took care of them. It was. Let's face it. It's hard. You know what I mean? It's hard to put any kind of an animal in that. I'm an animal lover, and I didn't. Now we all understand it better. But they had an elephant show at the Golden Nugget. And they had two elephants. They had a mother and a little baby elephant, and they had a full-time trainer. And the trainer would walk the elephant out of the paddock, and they would walk it down the elephants into the back of the casino, and they would go on and they would do the show. And then when the elephants got done, they would close the curtain. And then they would have the comedian would come out while they cleaned the stage in case the elephant pooped or peed, and then they would clean the stage, and they would bring up all the instruments for the musical acts, and then the comedian would do like 18 minutes, and you'd get off the stage, and then they would bring out. I worked there with Little Anthony. I worked there with Chubby Checker, a band called Exile. It was a whole bunch of really great stuff. The gold. I had a really lot of good memories of the Golden Nugget in Reno, which was really pretty cool. And I remember we went whitewater rafting in Reno, and the guy said to me, "Do you go whitewater rafting in Jersey?" And I said, "Pal, if you're in a river in Jersey, you pissed off the wrong people." So it's just
whitewater rafting in Jersey. Yeah, I haven't heard that one. I can't even imagine.
I opened for Michael Bublé at where was that? I opened for Michael Bublé at, that was also the music. It was the Round Theater. I just mentioned it before. The theater go round, and it was out in Long Island. It's still there and still works. And Bublé, like they had at that time when I worked with him, he was totally unknown. I think he had just come on the scene, maybe was getting a little recognition. So the house was like maybe 1/3 full, and they kind of cut off because nobody knew who Michael Bublé was at that time. Now, I mean, he's enormous, he's huge, but these were all the people that we saw, and as they came up, even going back to the days in New York when we were doing the comedy clubs, whether it would be Larry David or Bill Maher or Andy Kaufman. These were just the guys that hung out and they were learning the craft. And Gilbert Gottfried. I actually had a little comedy troupe at one time. I think in the late 70s, early 80s. I formed a comedy troupe with a friend of mine named Vincent, and it was called Funny Business. And we were selling shows to colleges, and we were selling 7-act shows. There were 7 performers on that show. And we would have a show. It would be myself, Gilbert Gottfried, Joe Piscopo, Jimmy Brogan, who became one of the talent coordinators for The Tonight Show. And just a host of tons of guys we would all do these shows and make $50, $100, a few $100, but a lot of them went on to become celebrities, and it was it was fun to watch all that happen.
That's cool to see that develop the way that it did. Now I want to talk to you about cruise ships, because you and I obviously met working on Royal Caribbean, and you have a great story about working a cruise ship years ago. And you were telling me this story. I was in tears. So please, this is hands down one of the best stories in comedy that I have.
I don't know if it's the best story in comedy, but I mean, it's an interesting story in cruise ship lore for me. I mean, you and I have been doing ships now for a while, and you learn as you do that. You're in a corporate setting nowadays. I mean, today's setting, you and I are working in corporate venues, basically. So everything is pretty much spit and polish, as they would say, whether you're going to work for, Royal Caribbean or Princess. I mean, right now I met you on Royal Caribbean. I do a lot of work for them. And right now I think they are like just about, the top of the line type of cruise ship, and everything is done by the book, and you know what to expect, and you get used to that. And in all cruise ship companies now, the customer is always right. I mean, the customer is always right. If anything's wrong, they try to make it right. And that's the type of life that you and I are used to, right? I mean, with companies and corporations catering to the customer and wanting the customer to have a good experience so they'll come back. Well, as careers go, your career may ebb and flow. And I was at a point when I was living out in LA, going back 20 years ago. I hit a down spot in my career where I wasn't getting that much work, and I needed some work, and I wanted to do some cruise ship work. So my agent said, "We have this job for you," and I said, "Okay, I'll take it." And they said, "It's on a cruise ship, but it's the Dolphin." And I said, "Well, what is that?" And they go, "It's just a smaller ship." I was like, "Okay." So I go and I do this ship it's called the Dolphin 4. And I never heard of it. I get there and I go up the plank, I'm getting on the ship, and it's a very small ship. I mean, by comparison, it probably held, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people tops. I mean, in comparison to today's like 10,000 ships, 10,000 people, it's not a big ship, but at the time it was pretty decent size. So I get on. And first thing I notice is it's really old. The Dolphin 4 is kind of like old. It's a little, you could see it wasn't in the best shape. So they said, "Well, where's my room?" They gave me my room, and I go down to the room and I open the door, and it was disgusting. It was beyond disgusting. I opened the door and there was like the shag carpet. It looked like a whorehouse from hell. It looked like one of those old bordellos. You go in there. Don't ask me how I know what a bordello looks like, but I do. Anyway, you go and it was shag carpeting, blue lighting. That I think they even had the walls carpeted with this crap. It was horrid. And you open the bathroom door. That was where I just drew the line. The bathroom door opened, and there was a toilet, and there was a shower over the toilet, so that when you showered, you were right. Your toilet was going to get wet, And it was paramount to something you would find maybe in a prison cell, you know? And I'm thinking like, well, this is bad. So I went up to the desk and I said, listen, there's a mistake. You know, there's a mistake. And they go, no, there's no mistake. I go, well, that can't be my room. They go, no, it's your room. I go, well, it's filthy. It's disgusting. Well, we'll have it cleaned. I go, I don't think it's going to do. I look up, and when I was in the room, you look up at the vent, and there was water dripping from the ventilation system, and God only knows what other mess was coming out of there. The carpet was crackling when you walked on it. You don't know what went on.
Oh.
You know? So I said, all right. So I go, okay. So I got off the ship. I got off the ship as quick as possible. And I called my agent and I said, I'm coming home. And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, I'm coming home. I go, this is not what I signed on for. I said, it was an inside cabin. There's no windows. There's only one door in or out. And I said, it's a death trap. I said, I'm not going to work this thing. I'm coming home. And he goes, well, you're going to get in trouble. I go, I don't give a shit. I'm getting out of here. I said, I'll come home. I'd rather drive a truck than do this shit. So he goes, well, all right. He goes, listen, he goes, you got to do me a favor. You got to do me a favor. I go, what do you need? He goes, you got to promise me that you will just do 2 nights. Just do 2 nights. And I go, no. And he goes, just do 2 nights and I can replace you. He goes, I can replace you and I will save all of our hides. He goes, because if you walk off this now, he says, you're gonna get blackballed here. You're gonna cause me a head full of problems. He said you don't want to do this. And I said, I thought about it and said, all right, okay, I can get through 2 nights. So I go up that night on deck and I meet the cruise director and the assistant cruise director. And these guys are blasted. They've been drinking pretty heavy. So I've never seen that before. You know what I mean? I've never seen that before. You know what I mean? And there's this one guy, and he's from Jersey. I think he's the assistant cruise director. And he says to me, he goes, where are you from? I go, Jersey. Yeah, he goes, me too. That's great. And he goes, yeah. He goes, listen, he goes, any of these passengers give you any shit, you let me know. I'll fucking deck them. And I was like, what? What? I go, what did this guy say? He's gonna hit him? He goes, yeah, these people, they think who they are. These people think who they are, or some shit like that, you know? So now I'm thinking, one of the cruise directors says, you want a drink? I'm going like, fuck, why not? You know? So I'm thinking, this is a pretty good job. I go, maybe this isn't gonna be so bad, right? So I have to do so. Everything on the ship is garbage. Everything. The food I never. You know, we go to buffets now where you walk in and on a buffet they have. You know, on like Royal Caribbean. You know, you can walk in there. There might be there's shrimp. There's salmon.
It's prime rib and
steak,
oh yeah.
You know, prime rib. This on the Dolphin, it was just cold cuts. And if you've ever seen, I don't know, it was like a cold cut tray from like, you know, a 5 and 10 cent store, because the cold cuts were the cheapest thing. Have you ever seen cold cuts that were so cheap? Like you would pick up like a piece of ham and you could see through it, or it had like jelly in it. It looked like Jello. It was like a gel. It wasn't even like a real food. There might have been some meat mixed into this gel, but they said it's turkey, this Jello turkey. So, and you know, and they had loads of it, and they would just splatter it out, everybody. And the cruise director would go, "Oh, folks, in another hour, the buffet, time to eat again." And you're just going, "Who's gonna eat this food?" It was so bad, and the lady that worked at there was a woman that worked at the hairdressers. Well, apparently this was the type of people that we would get on. They were, yeah, I mean, they were below white trash. I mean, white trash didn't even begin to talk about these people. I mean, who they were. And the woman in the hair salon would tell me, she said the passengers would come on with lice in their hair. She said you could see the lice jumping out of their hair. You could see that. Oh. She goes, and it was, so the people that were on the ship, somehow this entire thing was attached to, what do you call it? A timeshare. Like if you went and you saw the timeshare presentation, you got the cruise. So that's how
Okay.
that deal worked. So people, I guess, sat through the timeshare and they gave him this cruise to God only knows where it went. I think it went to like one island for one day or something. And it was horrid. And everything about it was terrible. And I remember like talking to the one of the music acts, and I go to him, "How do you work here? How could you stay here?" And he goes, you'll see. Wait till payday." He goes, "Wait till payday." So I go, "All right." So payday comes. Well, they pay you at sea, and they pay you out past the 12-mile reef. So you're in international waters, so they don't have to give you taxes. So they paid you in cash in an envelope. And the guy goes, and they give me this big fat wad of cash. And the guy goes to me, he goes, "Listen, take this." He goes, "Nothing comes to your house." I go, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Nothing comes to your house." Get it? No tax. So you're not going to have to worry about paying taxes. So I go, "Well, that's pretty cool." Well, I did it like 2 times, maybe 2 or 3 times I did it. And at the end of that year, at the end of the year, I got a 1099 from the IRS. So I looked at it, and it was, I only did it 2 or 3 times. It wasn't that much money. So, I mean, paying the taxes was no big deal. But the music guy calls me up crying. I go, "What happened?" He goes, "They sent me a 1099. I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I spent all the money. I have no penny for taxes." So this guy, I don't know whatever happened, but they sent him a 1099 for his taxes, and he had no money. So so back to the ship. The ship thing there was all kinds of stuff going on at the ship. Like these guys were getting paid in cash. Everybody was getting cash. There was all kinds of things going on. I heard talks about, I don't know how true it was, but there was talk about scams going on where they were docking in these islands and selling food off the back of the ship to island people that was ship food. And that's how a lot of the crew was skimming money. They were
What?
Everybody had a.
They're selling that crappy lunch meat off the back of the ship?
Oh yeah, everybody had a scam at the time. Everybody was scamming, doing something. I don't remember what year this was. Could have been 70s, 80s, 90s. But I mean, it was this unbelievable thing. Back if you haven't done that much cruising years and years and years ago, before all the corporations were formed. A lot of those cruise directors back then, they were rich guys, because all that money that they would get from horse racing and bingo, that money stayed on board and got split up among the higher up guys. There was a lot of stuff that went on many years ago before all the major corporations got formed. Once that happened, everything became corporate, and that didn't go on anymore. But years ago, they were like pirates. I mean, it was like wild what happened. There was crazy stuff going on, man.
Well, I remember you were telling me that, because years ago, the cruise directors, now, the cruise lines will endorse certain jewelry stores or, different port shops. And they're like, "Hey, this place is recommended by fill in the blank cruise line." And
right.
I remember you telling me years ago,
that used to be the
cruise directors were the ones that would say, "Hey, by the way, stop by, Elite Diamonds over here in Grand Cayman, and they'll go ahead and take care of you, 10% off." And then they would end up getting a kickback from that jewelry store.
Yeah, these guys
to the cruise director.
Go out. The cruise directors used to go out years ago, and they could walk down the street and just collect envelopes from all these different companies, from all these different stores. Nowadays, it's like a regular, being a cruise director is like a job. I mean, and these guys, most of these guys that do it, I wouldn't want the job. They work so hard, and they're always going, and they're always busy. And, it's all within the confines of a corporation, of course,
Sure.
But before that, going back many, many years, it was the Wild West. I mean, it was crazy. It was, what? It was like everything else, man. Like you go, I live in Jersey. We used to talk about Port Newark. Years ago, guys would come around the neighborhood and they go, "Hey man, we got these TVs. They fell off the truck." All that stuff was back then. And you can't.
Sure.
that was before they had scanners and all the little, the code bars and everything. I mean, nowadays everything's accounted for. Back then, you go back 30, 40 years ago down the port to any port in the U.S. I mean, pilfering was an accepted thing. I mean, every company expected to lose 10% of their goods to pilfering, which was normal back then. Not today, but then
it's so funny.
That's how things have changed.
Billy, I absolutely love your stories. And by the way, I don't know how you can say that dolphin story is not one of the best stories in comedy ever. I remember you telling me that in the bar, and I could not stop laughing.
Don't forget the captain. I got to tell you the last part of that story before we take off, because I know we're running out of time. But everything was broken on the ship, and nothing worked right. And I remember the sound equipment would go in.
Everything was broken.
The sound equipment would go. You'd be trying to talk, and the sound would go. So I was on stage trying to do my show in the family show, and you were doing a floor. There was no stage. It was a floor show. The ship was that small. It was like a floor show. So I'm on the dance floor doing my show, and I'm trying to talk in the microphone, and it's broken. And I really had it at this point. I'm up to here with the broken mic, and I threw the mic down. I said, "Fuck it," out loud, and I turned around and I walked off. And the cruise director is standing there, and I'm walking right towards him, and he goes like this. He goes. So I look at him, he goes, he's standing there, and he looks at me, he goes, "Go finish the show." I go, "What?" He goes, "Go finish the show." So I was like, come on. Because we were drinking buddies by this time. I'm going like, come on. He goes, no, go finish the show. So I go back out. I apologize to the audience. I pick up the mic. I start the show again, and I finish. It goes really good. So I finish the show. I walk off, and the cruise director says to me, "Go apologize to the captain for saying fuck in the family show." I was like, "Oh, did I say that?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I go up to the captain. The captain's sitting there. He's got a drink in his hand. And I don't remember, this is so many. The captain's sitting there, and he's like a Greek, one of the Greeks. And I go, "Captain," I'm really sorry I said fuck during the family show. And he goes, "Don't worry, Billy. It did not see any children. It made me laugh." That was it. I mean, nowadays you'd be fired for that, and you'd be off the show the next day.
Done.
You're buying your drinks after the show. So the business has changed, but the stories of the past were the best.
The stories are absolutely incredible, and people need to get a chance to see you whenever they get the opportunity. I know you're working the cruise ships quite a bit. You pop around New Jersey and New York and Connecticut and do stuff all the time, Pennsylvania, in your neck of the woods. So they need to hit you up on social media. You're on Facebook, correct?
Yes, Billy Garan is on Facebook.
Billy Garan is on Facebook. I like when you speak of yourself in the third person. Billy Garan is on Facebook.
I do. I will have a website up in about a month. My website is off right now because we're redoing the whole thing. So it'll be back up in about a month.
Buddy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate getting a chance to talk with you here today, and also working with you, and hope to do it again here real soon, my friend.
I'm just jazzed about seeing you, man. And I haven't seen you since we left the ship, so I'm looking forward to working with you again.
I know. Absolutely. Cannot wait, my friend. Great to see you, and good luck with everything. We'll see you out there on the road, my bud.
Okay, buddy. Be well. Thanks.
All right, man. You too. Thanks. Billy Garan from New Jersey. Derek Richards here in Las Vegas. A Drink with Derek, brought to you by the good folks at VegasSportsAdvantage.com. Go online and hook up with them. Save yourself some money. Any package that you get, if you're going to bet sports, save yourself a few bucks. Type in the promo code Derek35. Save 35% on any of their packages. Also, grab a copy of my album, Double Down, iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon. And also check out the Irish Comedy Tour coming to a town near you. And if we're not coming to a town near you, get on a plane and get to that town. TheIrishComedyTour.com is our website. A Drink with Derek. Thank you so much for being here. Derek Richards here in Las Vegas. We will see you next time. Take care. Bye.
You're watching Conservative Television of America, working hard to stick socialism where the sun don't shine.